Hey everyone, welcome back. So I just got back from seeing Morbius. Um, I'll admit right off the bat, I didn't have high hopes for this one. I thought it was gonna be a generic and a bland comic book film. Um, I did go in there enjoying Venom and Venom Let There Be Carnage, even though like those two movies have their problems. But I went into Morbius hoping that I'd at least get some enjoyment out of it. So, I mean, I was right. I was entertained by the movie. It's not the best Marvel movie by far. It's not the best like Sony Spider-Man universe movies by far. Um, there's honestly not too much I can say. I know I've already seen a bunch of reviews that are trashing it, and it does have like a ton of problems. Um, I don't even know where to begin. Jared Leto's okay in this movie. Like there's a lot of times where he just feels bland, like both before and after he becomes like the comic book living vampire character. Um, Literally, like there's really only three, well no, four characters that I guess sort of stand out. Jared Leto as Morbius, Matt Smith as his brother Milo, um, foster brother Milo, I think. um, that one doctor from the trailers who's Michael's love interest, and Jared Harris who plays like the foster father Nicholas or something like that. So yeah, sorry. There's not a lot of things that I can really say about this one. Um, the story was meh. I mean, guy does illegal testing, comes back. He cures himself, obviously, but it has like very bad side effects. In a lot of ways, it kind of makes him like similar to the Hulk, kind of, in that regard, where no, that's not it. Where he cures himself of a disease, but in doing so, he kind of like becomes worse. He turns himself into something worse. Um, basically every kind of character except for Matt Smith's was just carbon cookie cutter cardboard. Uh, Sorry, just wooden, really. Um, Except for this one scene that I'll talk about a little bit later. And by the way, there's spoilers for this. But depending on how many spoilers there is, I might or might not put it in the title. Um, one of the only other kind of things that I really liked was the soundtrack, which at times it's really good, but at other times it just sucks. Like there's some scenes where like there's ominous music playing, like when Michael injects like this mouse or something with his cure, and then find out that the cure worked, and like the ominous music is playing, and I feel like that scene like should have probably had like more upbeat music, like yay they cured the they found a cure for Morbius's condition where like he can't create more blood in his body. Um, oh jeez, I'm sorry. The CGI and makeup is all right. There's a few times where it's just dodgy, but other times where it looks great. Especially how like they quickly transition from like Morbius and Milo like becoming their vampire personas and then like their normal human guys. Right. I'm sorry. I just got back. I need to take a nap after this. Um, there's just not very much that I can say on this. That's actually good, I guess, because almost everything about it really was like bland and generic. Um, like it definitely wasn't one of the worst movies that I've seen, but it was just bland, just regular superhero fanfare, and I don't think this is just like, um, and this isn't like superhero fatigue or Marvel fatigue, like I believe people have called it, like right after Avengers Endgame came out, like because I enjoyed watching Spider-Man Far From Home, and I enjoyed watching No Way Home. So it's not really superhero fatigue. Maybe it's just that like we've just set set the bar high for like superhero movies, or maybe it's just that like this movie just is below average. Well, it's definitely below average. Um, I don't know. I guess like I said before, that I was gonna bring up now. Matt Smith is great. Like my favorite my favorite scene of the whole movie isn't even a fight scene. It's just the scene of like Matt Smith just dancing in this apartment or something as he's getting ready, like putting on a suit, and like every so often like he just changes to his vampire persona at will because like there's a plot point where like he takes the cure that turns him into a vampire just like Morbius. Um, but but really, it really does look like Matt Smith is having fun in the role. Like he's the only actor in this movie who looks like he had fun with his character. Really, the only scene of him in that I don't really like is when when he meets up with like Nicholas, Jared Harris's character, who by the way, side note, I wish that guy got more screen time. Like I liked him as Moriarty in Sherlock Holmes: Game of Shadows, so I was really disappointed when like he only had like a handful of scenes. I think he was only in there for about 15 or so minutes, which I'll get more onto that in a second. But but like there's a specific scene towards the end of the film where Nicholas he finds out like both Morbius and Michael like turn themselves into vampires, and he finds out that like Milo killed all these people. So he goes to confront him, and the way Matt Smith it's not exactly the way he talks, mostly like his dialogue, and this is also gonna be another problem that I'm gonna mention down the line, is that the way Matt Smith's dialogue is scripted, it basically makes him come off as like a whiny little kid throwing a temper tantrum, because he's always going off on Jared Harris, going like, oh well, you never took my side. You're always taking Michael's side. Like he's just your favorite son. And it just goes like that for I think a straight minute, and it just feels off. And the worst part is like for basically almost the whole film until he takes that cure at least, he's like a meek, timid guy, kind of like Jared Leto. Like when they both start out with the disease, and once he finally takes that cure, like he basically does a complete 180, where I guess it would make sense if like he becomes more confident and everything, but in that 180 he basically becomes like supervillain take over the world kind of evil. And like even then it just felt a little bit weird. I mean, I guess I suppose that like if he would like maybe he would go on a power high, like maybe someone like in that kind of situation, not in the exact same circumstances, but in a situation similar to that, maybe if someone like did get like that kind of power, maybe they would go on a power high that quick, but I'm not sure. But either way, that's the only scene with Matt Smith in it that I didn't really like. The fight scenes were all right, especially when like Matt Smith and Jared Leto are actually fighting. The only problem really is like how they end. Like so, like there's a fight scene where right after Jared Leto escapes prison, and like this was sort of shown in the trailers where like he's in that orange jumper and everything, and he fights Milo. Whew. So he fights Milo. He's in a subway, and then the cops come to arrest them both, and Milo just straight up murders all of the cops, and Jared Leto just stands there and watches it all happen. And we've already seen multiple times that they both have like super speed, so Michael Morbius could have easily stopped Milo from doing any of that, but he just stood there. There's another scene really early on that I also thought was a bit stupid, where the doctor, the love interest of Michael, I think her name's Martine, she's talking with Michael about how like, oh, you're like illegally smuggling vampire bats into the country, and like this stuff will get you fired and possibly arrested and everything, and like the whole glass container, like I don't even know what to call it, like a tank or whatever that houses all of the bats, is just there in the middle of the laboratory. The bats are just flying around, and Martine is saying that, and not only do you see someone like walking in the background, like not only do you see someone walking in the background of the shot, so they're in clear view of seeing the tank, if assuming that's even a person that that's like supposed to be a background character of the movie. But then presumably I think that same character like actually comes in, literally stands right next to the glass case and says like, hey, there's this one kid that's sick, we gotta go and save her. And she's literally a few feet away from the glass tank, and there's also like this other window like separating her, but not once does she look at the tank and go like, holy crap, why do you have these live bats here? And I get it, they had to save a kid, but no, not once does the nurse mention it again, so clearly it wasn't that big of a deal that Michael was sneaking in those vampire bats. But whatever. Yeah, there's really not much else I can talk about with this movie. I mean, oh yeah, and this is where the whole spoilers thing does come in. During the end, there are two post-credit scenes, which they're basically like two mid-credit scenes technically, where like they do feature Vulture from Spider-Man: Homecoming, and sorry, hang on. So the first one is basically about how like when the multiverse cracked open from Spider-Man No Way Home, it even shows that like dimensional tear or whatever that was shown at the very end of the movie. Because of that, Adrian Toomes got somehow misplaced from the MCU into Sony's Spider-Man universe, and he's just in an empty jail cell. And like it even has that little like white glowing effect from the ending of No Way Home, where like all the villains and Toby and Andrew, like they get sent back to their own universes. And I both sort of like that and don't like it. I do like it because like it does actually confirm a theory, yeah, that I had from No Way Home, where like where the villains, they showed up in like the basically like the same, what was it, like, I don't even know if I'm saying it right, but like they showed up in the same latitudinal area of where they left off in the Spider-Man films, where like so in No Way Home, Doctor Strange specifically said that he found the lizard in the sewers, and that actually you can possibly pinpoint where and when exactly the lizard was in the first Amazing Spider-Man film, for that whole to help you kind of figure out like when he was dropped off at in No Way Home. Same with Electro, where I think in the Amazing Spider-Man 2, he was like on the outskirts of the city with that little power grid thing. So then when No Way Home comes out, he gets dropped off like on the outskirts of New York. Sandman, I guess he could have been dropped off whenever, because it's pretty clear that that the version that he is like post Spider-Man 3. Green Goblin, he just showed up in the middle of the city, so like you could argue that that could have been like during his either first or second, most likely second encounter with Spider-Man, the one where like he's on that bridge and he's holding like Mary Jane in one arm and then like that bus full of people in the other. Sorry, not bus, carriage. And then as for Doc Ock, like he was in this like warehouse that was also on the outskirts of the city, possibly under a bridge or something, which would make sense with where he showed up in Spider-Man No Way Home. Well, actually, I think the battle on the bridge, I'll have to double check this and actually look it up, but I'm pretty sure that the bridge that he and Peter fought on during No Way Home was like on a bridge that was going out of New York. So I think that that's around the area that he was in Spider-Man 2. I'm gonna have to rewatch all these movies, but the fact that that Adrian Toomes, we originally saw him in a jail cell from Spider-Man Homecoming, and then he gets dropped off into another jail cell in Morbius, does hold up to that theory that I had. But then everything else just falls flat, and like none of this makes sense, because one, that whole spell at the end of No Way Home, like it was supposed to send all the villains and Toby and Andrew back to their universes. Like it shouldn't have touched Adrian Toomes at all. Unless if there was like this other side effect where like, oh, like some of the villains got brought in, but then some of the villains from like the MCU got swapped, which I guess could make sense, sort of. I mean, they really got to explain that, though, if they go that route. But I don't know. But then that just raises like even more kind of questions, like, well, if they were doing this thing where like people who knew Spider-Man from other universes got brought in, then how come like everybody who knew Spider-Man in this universe, or like originally knew Spider-Man in the MCU, like how come they all stayed? And sorry, comic book movie logic. So the first post-credit scene is just him showing up there. He makes a quip about like, well, I hope the food's good in this joint. and then like it cuts to a newscast talking about how he's getting released. It's definitely not like what we saw in the trailers. And then the second post-credit scene is Morbius driving a car to the middle of nowhere. Vulture meets up with him. He has a suit that is nearly identical to the one as it was in Spider-Man Homecoming. And he just says to Morbius, like, oh, well, I don't know how I got here, but I'm pretty sure that it's Spider-Man's fault. So let's team up, like, you, me, a couple other guys like us, so I'm pretty sure he's referring to Venom. And he might also be referring to Kraven, because we're getting a Kraven movie next year, maybe. Let's all team up and kill Spider-Man, even though he's probably not the same Spider-Man that I thought. That's more or less what he said or implying, and Morbius accepts, too. So, and then, like, you thought there were problems with the first post-credit scene. There's a bunch in here. Like, for one, how did he get his Vulture suit? How did he get that fast? And how does it look almost exactly like it does in Homecoming? Because, as I recall, his suit from Homecoming was created using, like, Chitauri technology, right? And so was, like, all of his, like, arsenal and gadgets and all that. And now we get to here, and as far as we know, at least, the Chitauri do not exist in this universe. Like, the last I checked, Sony had to do things, like, in a partnership with Marvel, and that's how, like, those 3 Spider-Man movies exist within the MCU in the first place. Because I am pretty sure that those movies are not, like, actually distributed by Walt Disney. Like, if they were, then those movies would show up on Disney Plus. But so Vulture shows up. He somehow has his suit back. It's somehow almost identical to the Chitauri suit, which I did hear rumors that it's the same suit from The Amazing Spider-Man 2. Okay. He offers to partner up with Morbius. Morbius accepts. I don't really understand why Morbius just accepted that deal, because whatever they're doing with Morbius, like, he's either a hero or an anti-hero. Most likely an anti-hero. And actually, the way I likened it to was he's basically sort of like the Punisher, where he's technically doing heroic things, but even though, like, New York and the New York Police Department and the FBI and all those guys, they see him as a villain, right? So the only way that the only way that I'd see Morbius, like, teaming up with Vulture and forming this little Sinister Six group that they're obviously teasing is if, like Punisher in his first few comics, he thinks that, like, Spider-Man is, like, doing evil stuff, because he did make it clear in the movie that, like, oh, I'm only gonna feed on the blood of, like, bad people. So, but I'm pretty sure that Morbius would not think that, like, Spider-Man is evil. Like, that whole graffiti thing in the trailer where it had, like, Spider-Man's image with the word murderer on there. I don't remember seeing it in the actual movie, and I'll get more onto that in a second. But unless Morbius is somehow tricked into thinking that Spider-Man is evil, because Spider-Man obviously exists in this universe. Like, when Vulture mentioned Spider-Man, like, Morbius didn't just look at him and say, like, who's Spider-Man? No, he knows who Spider-Man is. Um, so unless he thinks that Spider-Man is a bad guy now, I don't see them teaming up. But whatever. Either way, um, and right before I get to the next to my next point, actually, to me, it also wouldn't really make sense for Vulture to go after Spider-Man at all, because he made it clear, like in Homecoming, that like since Spider-Man A saved Liz and B saved his own life, he wouldn't. He probably would still fight Spider-Man, but I don't think he'd outright try to kill him. Because, like, if you guys remember during that post-credit scene from Homecoming where he's visited by the Scorpion in prison, and Scorpion teases the Sinister Six, and he goes, like, yeah, me and some guys, me and the boys are forming a group to kill Spider-Man, and, like, we heard that you know who he is, and Toomes straight up protected Peter's identity and said, like, yeah, well, if I knew who he was, I would have killed him already. So it's pretty clear that Vulture has no motive to kill Spider-Man. So maybe he'd fight Spider-Man, but he wouldn't. I doubt he'd actually outright kill him. And like even though Doctor Strange like erased everybody's memory that Peter Parker is Spider-Man, that Peter Parker exists, I seriously doubt that like Vulture would still be gunning for him, because as far as I know, he still thinks like, oh well, Spider-Man saved my daughter and Spider-Man also saved my life. I just don't know who Spider-Man is. Which would actually make that post-credit scene, like, from Homecoming true. That, like, if he knew who Spider-Man was, he'd be dead. But, okay. And I guess that also kind of brings up my next point, that, like, the final movie has so many things that's just cut out from the trailers. Like, I remember seeing a few days ago, like, a rumor that all the Spider-Man connections would be cut out of the film, and I'm not sure exactly how many Spider-Man connections there were. Like it's obvious. It's obvious there was like some bits of the entire film cut out, but like you still got those connections to Venom, where like one of the FBI agents mentions like San Francisco, and Morbius does like make that joke about how like he's Venom. When he confronts like these counterfeiters, and like you do see like the Daily Bugle newspaper like quite a bit in this film actually, and then like Vulture does show up in the post-credit scene and mentions Spider-Man, but it just feels like there's a ton of moments from like the entire film, not just the Spider-Man connections that were just left out. Like, if I recall, like there was actually quite a bit of Jared Harris in the trailers, where he and Morbius are like discussing like how bad, like how far can they go in science, and Jared Harris like outright says like, you can go as far as you need until like the cure makes you until the cure becomes worse than the disease. That's how far you can go. And I don't remember that scene ever being in the film. And there was a scene that I'm pretty sure was a little bit longer on Jared Harris's death, because like Milo does kill him towards the end of the film. Like that certainly wasn't in there. Even with Vulture himself, and this is the main thing that was brought up, like the trailers made it seem like Vulture would actually be in the prison with Jared Leto. And, well, he clearly wasn't. And I'm starting to think that that Vulture was going to have a very significant role in the Morbius film. And, like, that's what the trailers made it seem like. And, like, kind of reinforced my my thoughts when, like, the credits actually rolled and you actually see, like, the credit of Michael Keaton as the Vulture, where he's like 5th or 6th build in the movie. Like, you got, like, Jared Leto as Morbius, Matt Smith as Milo Morbius, the doctor, love interest, 3rd, Jared Harris, his character, the 2 FBI agents, and then Michael Keaton as the Vulture, like, directly under them. And then all of those other characters who I'm pretty sure had more screen time than Michael Keaton come right underneath him. And normally I'd say, like, well, that's because Michael Keaton has a bigger role. I'm sorry, not that. Michael Keaton is, like, a bigger known actor. But on the other hand, he was relegated to a post-credit scene. Why would you place him that far in the billing? Man, but I don't know. I'm still thinking that, like, a bunch of the movie, like, not just the whole Spider-Man connections, were cut. But really, I guess just to summarize this whole thing, it was like a bland, generic movie. I did still think that it was fun, especially with the fight scenes. I did forget, like, I did like a few of the first-person shots where, where that, like, scene in the cargo ship that was shown in the trailers, like, a lot of times it goes from, like, Michael's POV to, some of the ship crew members' POV when, like, Morbius is attacking them. And I did think that was a little bit cool. It really drew upon, like, just horror movie elements. But that's really all about it on the stuff that I liked and the brunt of the stuff that I disliked. I thought Jared Leto was just okay in this movie. Like, he was miles better than, like, his Joker from Suicide Squad, obviously. Like, it's not even that, like, Jared Leto is a bad actor or anything. Like, if you guys remember when I made that video of, like, all of my favorite movies for every year of my life, like, 2021, my favorite, it was either 2020 or 2021, no, 2020, where my favorite movie from that year was The Little Things, where Jared Leto was in there, and, like, he played a guy who was like a murder suspect because he loved, like, he was one of those, like, fans of, like, true crime and unsolved murders and that kind of stuff. But I don't know, just taking this into account along with Suicide Squad and The Little Things and that one Netflix movie The Foreigner, I'm like, I really don't think that, like, that this is Jared Leto's fault. I think it's the fault of the producers and directors, because Jared Leto is a decent actor when he's given enough to work with. I think it all just comes down to, like, the direction that he's given. Because, like, he was good in The Little Things and he was good in The Foreigner. It's just this movie and Suicide Squad that are, like, that are unfortunately going to stick with him. But that's really it for this movie. Like, I already had little to no high hopes for the Kraven the Hunter movie because, like, so for the Venom movies, like they could obviously go straight to anti-hero because that's what Venom is in the comics. Well, that's who he became, and he actually became an anti-hero very quickly, because like basically as soon as Carnage was introduced in the comics, like Venom like very quickly became an anti-hero. Morbius, I actually don't know too much about him. I can't remember if he was an anti-hero or not, but I do know that like I do remember reading his description for like the Maximum Carnage video game, and he was described as like preying on criminals by night while by day he searches for a cure. So I don't know, maybe he became an anti-hero at some point. I honestly don't know. I do know that like he and Spider-Man do fight sometimes, but then with Kraven, like you, as far as I know, Kraven has never been an anti-hero. He's been like a straight up villain. So I'm not sure how they're gonna spin this, especially because as far as I know, Kraven also hasn't been like also doesn't really have any like villains that he actually fights. So I don't know. But whatever hope that I did have for that movie, it's now even less because of Morbius. But that's it for me. If you're going to see it just for like Vulture, which I'll be honest, like part of me was going there just to see Michael Keaton return, like you're gonna have to wait until the end credits. You won't have to wait for the entire credits to roll like a usual Marvel movie, thank God. But if you're thinking that this is gonna be a really good movie, like Jared Leto's comeback, well, you're gonna be disappointed. But that's it for me.